Joe Rogan, Ivermectin, CNN, Sanjay Gupta. This story has exploded, and my new Substack post is about what you need to know about it. I thought it would be fitting to walk you through some of my thoughts on this topic because it's so interesting, both as to whether or not people should take this substance without definitive, conclusive randomized controlled trials, but also how the media ought to talk about it. So let's talk about these two things. Of course, as background, for 15 years now, probably a little bit longer, I have been the kind of person who is reluctant to embrace novel, unproven medications in the absence of adequately powered randomized controlled trials measuring clinical endpoints that actually matter to people without evidence of bias, without evidence of fraud. That's my bar to prescribe new therapies. Why? Well, it's detailed in my first book, Ending Medical Reversal. When you don't use robust evidence to jump on new treatments, new strategies, you often make an error. And that error is you do things for many years that don't actually help people and often hurt people. So I've had the same consistent philosophy for 15 years now, that you really need those definitive studies before you widely promote a product. That's especially true in conditions where the vast majority, 99% of people, will recover. That is absolutely the case, that you need evidence before you try novel things in this space. Doesn't matter what the circumstances are. Enter ivermectin. Now, ivermectin is one of, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 candidate compounds that people think might have helped in SARS-CoV-2. And over the last 18 months, we've learned a lot about many of these compounds. We learned about tocilizumab and dexamethasone and hydroxychloroquine, and we learned that through well-done randomized controlled trials. And some of these things have succeeded. Dexamethasone, if you're on oxygen or the mechanical ventilator. And some of these things have failed. Hydroxychloroquine for almost all of the uses to date. But you only learn that through adequately powered randomized controlled trials. So, when something seems promising, when something has bioplausibility, it has in vitro data, when something has retrospective observational studies, when something has ecological studies or studies that compare some region to the other and it looks promising, I don't personally put too much stock in those kinds of studies. Those studies are notoriously an error in biomedicine. I wait for large, adequately powered randomized controlled trials before I leap. I think that's the best way to practice medicine, and it's the best way for regulatory science. Now, there's some exceptions if things are dire and rare and there are not many good alternatives, but this is not one of those cases. SARS-CoV-2 is not rare, and most people who get ill with it do recover, so it doesn't really fit this kind of model. And if you want to learn more about that, you should read the last chapter of Ending Medical Reversal. Enter the current controversy. Joe Rogan, who contracted the virus, he took ivermectin along with a number of other substances. He recovered perfectly well. Was that because he took these substances or in spite of taking these substances? Nobody knows. There's no clear counterfactual for one person. But what was fascinating was the way CNN chose to talk about this topic. Now, CNN repeatedly, and in a Washington Post op-ed out today, it details, quote after quote, where they repeatedly refer to this as taking a veterinary product. He's taking horse dewormer. He's taking veterinary ivermectin. Of course, there is veterinary ivermectin, a product used for animals. There's also human ivermectin, a product that has been transformative for parasitic conditions. Joe Rogan, of course, did not take the veterinary product. He took the human product. And so, as he points out, CNN is lying. They lied in the past, and they continue to lie, saying he's taking horse dewormer. He's not. But why do they lie? Now, Mr. Rogan has a theory that is in part because this is a generic substance and no one's going to make a lot of money from it. I personally don't think that that's the reason. Somebody else offered online that this is about power, it's about control. I personally don't think that's the reason either. I think the reason is simpler. It is that they are leaning into the culture war at CNN. They're leaning into a culture war because that gets likes, retweets, clicks, views. And what's that culture war? Of all these 50, 60 substances, not all of them have become tied to political party or political tribe, but a few of them have. Hydroxychloroquine was one and ivermectin is another. I don't think tocilizumab actually got too politicized because for whatever reason, tocilizumab stayed neutral. It stayed purple. But these other two drugs have become heavily politicized. I don't think I fully understand why ivermectin. I think I have a sense of why hydroxychloroquine because Trump talked about it, but I don't think I have a good sense for why ivermectin. But regardless, once it becomes politically polarized, people on the left want to portray ivermectin as horse dewormer. It's a poison. It's toxic. Hydroxychloroquine will kill you if you take it. There's QTC prolongation. There's all these terrible harms from it. And people who are believers in it want to say, it's the miracle nobody wants you to know about. But both of those are the wrong way to talk about it. There are ongoing randomized controlled trials. You have to be very careful You can't demonize the product because you will subvert the equipoise for those randomization. You're going to prevent people accruing on that study if you keep saying nasty things about the drug. You also don't want to oversell it because it's actively being tested and it might not work. In fact, it probably won't work because the pretest probability that any new product works for an acute viral infection is very low. So you don't want to oversell it. You don't want to undersell it too. You want to demonize it. You want to come in the middle and kind of be neutral about it until those studies are closed, in which case you have the answer. So CNN comes and they lean in hard to the idea that he is taking a toxic, harmful veterinary product. And he is correct to point out that it's one thing for an average pundit to lie. It's quite another thing when that's a major news network. And he's right. They are, in fact, lying about it. And I think that should give us all a great deal of pause. That is not journalism. He is not taking that product. They should apologize, and they should admit if they know it or not. That's why they're doing it. The more you lean into that, the more you're going to get the likes and retweets from one tribe, and you're also going to get the hate response from the other side. They're going to hate on you and talk about you, which is more attention, which is the commodity in the space. So those are my thoughts. I am generally, and I have always been, the kind of person apprehensive about novel medical products based on circumstantial, quasi-experimental, uncontrolled, historical controlled studies. Why? Because I know the probability that those things actually yield fruitful and conclusive causal inferences, and that's very low. I love robust, well-designed, blinded, randomized controlled trials measuring what I care about. Why? Because that's the clearest truth signal in all of medical science. I will always be that way. I was that way. I will always be that way. I make exceptions in both of my books, Ending Medical Reversal, there are exceptions, and Malignant, there's some exceptional cases. I'm not always wedded to this paradigm. However, this does not fall within my exceptions. What I think is very interesting is that people don't see this way. And I also want to point out one more irony. The people on the left who are really, I think, very critical of ivermectin because it's supported based on all those quasi-experimental studies, they don't see that there are other things that they believe in wholeheartedly that they want to do that don't have well-designed, adequately powered cluster randomized trials showing benefit. They're happy to point out that county-by-county comparisons and flawed retrospective studies are fine for the interventions they want you to use. But they're happy to ignore that for this product they want to demonize. It's so nakedly tribal, it sickens me. I wonder how many scientists there are actually left in the world. How many people who actually say, the standard of evidence for whatever you want to offer, be it the thing your tribe likes or your tribe hates, should be consistent. And it should be adequately well-designed randomized controlled trials. If what you're talking about is a mechanical intervention, a non-pharmacologic intervention, it still needs randomization. It still needs adequate studies. You can't cite some lousy county-by-county study. And if you do that, how are you any different than people who want to sell this product, ivermectin, without doing those randomized studies? In the case of ivermectin, there are several ongoing studies. We will get the answer to that, I have no doubt. In these other cases, there are only one ongoing randomized control trial, and they're none in certain ages. That's a problem, and those ages are ironically the ages people feel most strongly about the product. So anyway, I just think it's a great hypocrisy. This is just such a great story. Someday a historian of science will see the hypocrisy on all sides here, that what you do in a time of crisis with any drug product or any intervention you think might work is you should do your damnedest to prevent yourself from tying that to a political identity. You want to keep it neutral and agnostic. You can implement it or not implement it while you wait. But while you're doing that, you must be running randomized controlled trials to lessen uncertainty. You can't just implement it or not implement it and never run those studies. You are as ignorant as you were when you started, and that's not scientific. And then the other thing you have to be careful of is you can't demonize something or you can't celebrate something that's ongoing in a randomized controlled trial. Either way, you poison equipoise. In one side, they just want to take it, and the other side, they don't want to be randomized to a 50% chance of getting it. So these are all been problems throughout this pandemic. And I can count literally on one hand the number of commenters I see who are scientists who split this elegantly. And I think many people are leaning in on both sides because the more you lean in, the more you get that immediate feedback from the pole of the tribe. And that's the problem. So we've lost the center here. So those are my thoughts. Joe Rogan, ivermectin, Sanjay Gupta. He's right. CNN did lie. Should he have taken the product? I would have advised against it because I would wait for those randomized trials to be completed before I do. Is the evidence to date satisfactory? I think no, it's limited. Are there ongoing studies? Yes. People say there's not financial incentive to run those studies. You can say that, but they're actually running those studies. They will be answers in the next few months, 6 to 12 months. So those are my thoughts on this issue. It's a fascinating actually, it's really a fascinating story of politics meets science, meets medicine, meets sociology. And if you enjoyed this analysis, you really should read the book, Ending Medical Reversal. It will give you the broad medical perspective for why I think this way. So, until next time.